these days we have other Mexican superheroes. You know, there's America Chavez and like a bunch of others in the Marvel universe, but I don't think any of them are mainstream.
America Chavez is so weird because she's from another dimension.
Yes.
And frankly, I'm not entirely certain how that shakes out. She's basically Superman.
Well,
she has Superman's origin story.
She's Wonder Woman, actually, but she comes from an alternate universe that's like where like women rule everything.
But then that universe was basically destroyed and she was set there and she's the only one, which is very Superman.
That is very Superman.
Welcome to direct-to-video. VHS?
Netflix?
Disney Plus? HBO Max?
iTunes?
The podcast where we pair movies like fine wine. Or I guess we usually do, because this one's feeling like it might be unpaired. Frankly, this might be an over-paired movie in general, just because of the genre it's in.
Well, what I would say actually is that this is a movie that stands apart even in the genre that it's in. I
agreed with that before I watched it again, and I do think it stands apart, but so much of it is so... I would not show this to somebody who didn't... Or you could show this to somebody who didn't know the Marvel Universe, but you'd have to stop and explain some things.
I don't think so. I think there's a lot that you could not explain, and if they ask you about it, it's like, hey, that's very attentive of you. But I think this movie, for the most part, stands alone. Mm-hmm. I haven't thought about any Marvel movie, I think, since I watched Spider-Man. And I was surprised at how little this movie cares about the rest of the Marvel universe.
It does feel very of its own. Also, it's Black Panther. We're talking about Black Panther. Also... When I was watching this movie, it made me think of that moment. Do you remember? Because I feel like everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people talked about it or referenced it after Infinity War. There's a moment where like all the female superheroes and superhero type characters are together on screen.
Yeah.
Everybody and like it's supposed to be empowering.
Yeah.
And I watched that and it made me mad because so many of those characters were from like the last 3 years of a 10-year franchise.
Yeah.
And also, so many of them were specifically from this movie. This would be a female-led movie except for the fact that it has like one male lead. There's also, this movie introduces so many people in a way that's not bad. It's just, you're right, it helps make it feel like it stands apart from the other Marvel movies. Because it introduces all these characters, and all these characters are important on certain levels, you know?
Yeah. And they also all get to do something. Mm-hmm. Like, every character that is put on screen and named serves a purpose in the story. Like, the story itself is really tight. I honestly think this movie is too short. This movie could have used maybe another 30 minutes to
I don't know. A lot of these movies
hour.
Outstay their welcome. And I would not have... You know, I feel like it's better to be wanting more.
Yes, I think from like a moviegoer standpoint. But I do think from like a storytelling standpoint, I think this movie could have used like maybe an extra 30 minutes just to breathe a little bit. This movie is so tight.
You want the extended cut.
I want the extended cut. I own the Blu-ray actually, so I do have access to a lot of those deleted scenes.
Right, but they didn't do like the what do you call it? The
Snyder cut.
Lord of the Rings thing. Oh, could we?
I'm gonna watch that. By the way, I wasn't gonna watch that. I was not, because I watched Justice League in theater.
Right, we had a podcast about it.
I was alone in that theater. It was the weekend the movie came out. It was that Saturday that the movie came out, and I was alone in that theater. I was not going to watch the Snyder cut that's coming out, but now I feel like I kind of have to, because they've released a couple of screenshots, and it looks so bad.
Okay, if you said anything else, I would have been baffled. I would have been shocked.
And I've mentioned before, I fundamentally disagree with like Zack Snyder's ethos and like his entire
His whole deal.
I completely disagree with it. I think the most baffling thing to me about Black Panther is that this is a superhero movie directed by somebody who had never touched a superhero property. Because
those seem to be some of the best superhero movies
right?
that we get.
Because I remember the year before this movie came out, we got what did we get? We got Ant-Man and Doctor Strange, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't watch either of those movies. I was so burnt out at the time. But then this movie and Thor Ragnarok, I think, came out the same year. And it was like, I was excited about watching these movies again. That excitement never really went anywhere. But I was excited. And I think this movie and Thor Ragnarok, like, if I had to pair this movie with another movie, I would either pair it with Thor Ragnarok because it's a movie that came out at the same year and kind of does what this movie does, but with a little more baggage. 2 movies of baggage, right?
A little bit more baggage, but that one, much how this movie's like, we're gonna spend most of our time in
Wakanda.
places that the other movies never dealt with, and therefore we get to have a lot of our own stuff there. Ragnarok was like, let's just put him on a different planet. Let's just, what if he's on a different planet, and then we don't have to deal with a lot of stuff. Well, except Loki, I guess. He's got baggage.
He's got baggage. I would either pair this movie with that movie, or I would pair this movie with Blade, because I think before this movie came out, Blade was like the quintessential black superhero movie. It was the only one, I should say. It was the only one for ever, and it was a trilogy of movies, right, that, had a black lead and were very steeped in black culture, especially early 90s culture.
I think that's why I never watched it. The early 90s thing. There's a lot of movies that I sort of dismiss out of hand.
Because they were made in the early 90s. I agree.
For being very early 90s, for having that sort of energy.
Yeah. I would pair this movie with Blade over Thor Ragnarok because Blade is a movie that is steeped in black culture. Black 90s culture, which I think this movie has Black Panther has a little bit of. Mm-hmm. But also because I would want to know, because I haven't seen Blade, I think, since I watched it on TV as like a kid. And at the time I thought it was a scary movie. So I didn't finish it because I got too scared of the monsters and I stopped watching it. But I would like to know what the energy that Blade is bringing to the black experience versus Black Panther. Because Black Panther's energy is very hopeful. It's very optimistic.
I have a question about this movie. How do you feel about the fact that I feel like you can see very strongly a lot of the influences in it? Is that like a good thing or a bad thing? Because like it is its own movie, but you can see it pulling from a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
There's that scene where there's actually a whole part of the movie that's just a James Bond film, but specifically the scene in the lab is like so straight out of a James Bond film that it's kind of funny. And also it's a comedic scene itself. Or the ancestral plane makes me think so much of The Lion King. And for a second I thought, oh, it's just because that's the only time I really saw like African savanna depicted in media. But then I listened and I was like, this music sounds like when Mufasa comes back as a ghost. So I think it was a little on purpose. Stuff like this where it doesn't shy away from the fact that it is influenced by other stuff, and that's just stuff that I'm primed to see. And again, like I don't watch blaxploitation movies from the 90s, but I kind of know there's some stuff in there, like you can see it even just from cultural osmosis.
Yeah. I think this movie's use of homage and things that it straight up pulls from other movies is a good thing, if only because you mentioned that the lab scene feels like a James Bond scene. I think there are a lot of scenes in this movie that feel a little Star Wars. There are a couple of scenes in this movie that feel very like they are playing to those specific homages, because I think in a way this movie is saying, this is our James Bond, this is our Star Wars, right? Like we get to have this one for free. We don't have to look for it anymore. I think this movie is putting itself in that place because it wants to be able to say that this is what it is, and it is for you, the Black audience, to see yourself treated so reverently. And I remember when this movie came out, I watched this movie in the theater 3 times. The first time I watched it by myself. Because everybody else in my life was too busy to come. I was like, it's out today. We have to watch it now. And everyone was like, it's midterms. We can't just go watch a movie. And I was like, fuck you. I'm going to go watch it. So I walked to the movie theater by myself and I watched it. I stole a poster on the way out. This was a really small theater. Mm-hmm. All of the staff had gone in to clean the theater room that the movie was showing in. And I looked over and I noticed that one of the office doors was left open. So I wandered in and I saw that there was just a Black Panther poster there. And I was like, well, that's mine now. And I left. And I was so blown away by this movie. I immediately, the next weekend, I invited another group of friends, we have to go see this. You guys need to see this movie. I took somebody who wasn't into Marvel movies, and even they, at the end of this movie, were like, whoa, that was awesome. That was exciting. And then I went with another third group of friends because they felt bad that they couldn't come with me the first time. So they invited me, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. I fucking loved this movie. I drank it up like I was dying of thirst in the desert because, and I've lost a little bit of this since then, but because of a feeling that my mom mentioned after her and my little brother had watched it, which was, after this, it's our turn. We're going to get, our big Mexican superhero movie, right? It was such a vivid thing to see on screen. It was beautiful to just watch this movie and have that little thing in the back of my mind, we can do this too. And a lot's changed, I think, since this movie came out. in the world, in society, this movie doesn't hit the same way that it did back then, but it still hits pretty hard. I think it's a movie that is hopeful, but not in a way that is ignorable. That makes sense?
Yeah. So there is an issue with superheroes that I am always kind of thinking about, which is superheroes are always fighting for the status quo. In that, and we see this in this movie, because the thing that Killmonger wants, they have to go really far to make him unreasonable. Mm-hmm. And so the thing that this movie does is, because it has a superhero who is not a white dude in his 30s. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking Batman. Yeah. Right? Everybody likes Batman, but the problem with Batman is he's a rich white guy who are they're the problem. The problem of society right now. But because it has a character, or a hero who is not specifically that, it has the opportunity to say, these are the things that need to be changed. Mm-hmm. I think just having that superhero exist is one of the things that makes this so powerful.
I mean, I'm of the belief that you could just take any superhero for the most part and make them whatever you need to make them. I don't subscribe to the belief that any superhero is quote unquote sacred. I don't think any superhero is so sacred that you can't just make them something else. Whether that's making a new character who has the same name, like Miles Morales, or making a new character that's uniquely that, I don't care. But I do think it's, however you do it, it's necessary. Even Black Panther, who was created by Jack Kirby, was created because Jack Kirby saw a gap in comic books. He was like, well, there's an entire audience that we are not talking to because we don't have a black character, and it's the 70s, and it's the time. For a long time, Black Panther was treated by Marvel writers as a science fiction character because that's what Jack Kirby did.
And hey, there are a lot of science fiction elements in this. Yes. In this movie. Later, remind me to be angry about how vibranium works.
No, I explained it to you. I explained to you how it works.
Here's the thing. Your explanation of how it works is not my problem with it. My problem with it is bulletproof glass.
Oh, well, the glass can't be made of vibranium, Tony.
No, but all the bullets bounce off the glass of the car and don't leave any mark, which means they must put vibranium in it somehow.
Huh.
Because also Claw's like, it's made of vibranium, you can't shoot it. And it works better than other bulletproof glass, but it's see-through. That's actually, you know what? That's not the biggest one. I'm gonna hold on to the biggest one. I think that completely bulletproof car is the most sci-fi thing in this sci-fi movie. In this movie with, like, spaceships, basically.
And spaceships and hover bikes and...
We never get to see a hover bike, which seems mean. Oh, and I guess nanobots, I guess that's what all the sand-looking stuff is.
Yeah. The sand table, I think, is, like, such a cool idea.
Yes, and it allows for this genuinely beautiful animation to appear and disappear multiple times in this movie.
Well, I mean, let's get into it. Let's actually talk about this movie because we've been talking for a clip and have not started.
We've been talking about background a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of background to this movie. We start off in the 1990s, I think 1992. In Oakland, California, where we meet. Oh man, I didn't take any notes because I was going to, and then I didn't.
Yeah, no, I get it. So here's the thing. I have opinions about this movie, but my opinions are not altogether that important for this particular movie.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna say something that I read somewhere from somebody who was disappointed in this movie that I don't necessarily agree with. This person lived in Africa and said that this movie, even though so much of it supposedly takes place in African nations, is a very American story.
Yes.
And I think because it opens on Oakland, California, they're never trying to hide that. Yeah, it's absolutely an American story. That's why the African nation they spend the most time in doesn't actually exist. Because it is the sort of cultural dream of a true ancestral home.
Well, that's the thing. That's what this movie is. This movie is not an African movie. This movie is an African American movie, even though it takes place in Africa. And we'll talk about it. I think at the kind of the turn of the movie a little bit more. I think this movie understands what it is and what it's doing, and I can see being disappointed in this movie if you are African, but that unfortunately this movie is having a conversation with specifically African Americans, and we'll get there, I think. But yeah, it's definitely a point to bring up for a thing to not necessarily to be addressed, but a thing to note if you are doing a serious like study of what this movie is doing. So I mean, and we do get something I did forget is we do get like an overview of the kind of the legend of Wakanda.
Yeah, it's our first shot of this gorgeous animation.
Yeah, of the
which I decided
sand.
I'm 100% for.
Yes, it's great.
They apparently worship the god Bast, who is Egyptian, and I don't know precisely how worshipping Bast would have shown up in Central Africa, but I don't know, it's possible.
This is a thing that Jack Kirby did a lot, which is he would just take like a god from anywhere and be like, well, they're actually aliens or advanced humans or magic, and they actually existed. This movie seems to treat Bast as being an actual spiritual entity, which I think is good. I think that is the correct choice. But one of the explanations that Jack Kirby gives in some of the early comic books is that the Egyptian god Bast is like an adaptation of this god. Like this god is older and earlier, and the Egyptians named their god their Panther god after this one because of like trade and stuff with Wakanda, right? And that's true for I think every Wakandan god that isn't named also has a name that is basically just like a god from some other culture.
This is an interesting move to pull.
It is definitely like such a like white guy thing to do. Like I love Jack Kirby. I think Jack Kirby is like the greatest creative mind that Marvel ever had, but he did that a lot.
You gotta respect somebody who wanted to punch Nazis so bad.
That he got to the ground floor and they were gone. It's like, damn it, I missed my chance.
I love that story. Okay,
it's great. So we're in 1992, and we are in Oakland, California, where a war dog named Njobu, who is a royalty, is being visited by his brother, who is the current king T'Chaka, who we all remember from Civil War, where he tragically was murdered.
Whoa, Civil War spoilers.
I guess you'll never guess who did it. Njobu is being accused by his brother of assisting a black arms dealer in stealing vibranium, which caused the deaths of a ton of people. And Njobu denies it, and it's revealed that his partner James is actually Zuri, an undercover Wakandan who was sent to keep tabs on him by the king. And that's kind of where this scene ends. Mm-hmm. And a ship flies away, and a young boy playing basketball outside watches it as it goes.
Yeah, that's not going to come back.
Now in the present time in Wakanda, T'Challa has returned after T'Chaka's death to take the mantle of the throne. So him and Okoye, who is the leader, this movie teaches us so much about this country so quickly, which is why I compare it to Star Wars. I think this movie does a great job of Star Warsing its introduction to people.
Sure,
this person is a general, right? That's all you need to know. But there's a lot of deep lore that this movie does not get into that you can assume, and it's awesome. Mm-hmm. So him and Okoye, who is his general and the leader of this Kingsguard regiment, have decided to take T'Challa's friend / ex-girlfriend / daughter of another tribe, Nakia, out of an undercover assignment so that she can attend his coronation ceremony. And we get a little bit of a fight scene here.
It just shows off how cool T'Challa and all these other characters are, really. It's a good introduction to just the idea that these guys are badasses. This is basically a setup so that later we can have a James Bond scene.
Yes. I think it's also an introduction to T'Challa. In Civil War, T'Challa is a very specific trope. In that movie, he is a kind of an antagonist turned protagonist.
He's Inigo Montoya.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
He has one thing he wants to do. It's revenge. He's the bad guy for part of it, but then he joins the good guys because of revenge. And this allows him to have a little bit more depth of character.
Yeah, because he's not a plot point. This is his movie, so we get a little bit of seeing his regalness as he starts the mission, but also his humanity when he finally meets Nakia and he freezes.
Yeah.
But we see him dependent on these people, right? He is not a monolith. He has friends who help him.
So there's this great visual metaphor in this movie just about right now, which is them flying into Wakanda.
Yes.
Everything looks like jungle, and then the shield falls away, and we see the city / country of Wakanda. It seems like a very small country / big city.
Yes.
And Wakanda's shield is this great visual metaphor for the Western idea of Africa, which is deserts and jungles and all that, versus the reality, which is it being a place where people live, and those people a lot of the times live like us, but we do not think of them that way in America because we have this weird, outdated Western idea of what Africa looks like. And this is a great way to say that without saying it and just being able to see it in a second.
Yes. And we also get to see really quickly this movie's take on Afrofuturism, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's what this movie does. It's this art style, injecting African customs and culture and symbolism into futuristic environments and settings. Kind of what cyberpunk does to Asian aesthetics. It is kind of what Afrofuturism is, but it's less appropriation and more application, if that makes sense.
Well, in this time.
In this specific film.
It doesn't always necessarily need to be.
Yes, there is definitely bad Afrofuturism. It's cool. It looks cool. It also looks like nothing you've ever seen before in a movie.
I think that's one of the reasons, even beyond all the messaging in this movie, I think one of the reasons that it connects with people is because it doesn't quite look like anything anybody has seen before.
Yeah. So I think we meet Shuri, we meet his mother, played by the absolutely stunning Angela Bassett, who has been in Hollywood forever. She's an amazing actress. Seeing her in this movie, I was like, oh my god, they really just like went all out. A lot of amazing actors in this movie who are like kind of royalty in Black Hollywood. Yeah, we meet T'Challa's mother and sister. They have a little bit of a preparation for this ceremony where we learn that the ceremony is specifically like him presenting himself to be challenged. It is a chance for the other tribes to take the throne and the powers of the Black Panther. All of the other tribes, accept him. They're okay with him, except for the Jabari tribe, whose leader...
Can I say something about this scene? And I'm just gonna say this once because it's almost not a Black Panther thing as much as it is a Marvel thing. But this scene stood out to me because it showed them draining the water so that they could have this trial over the waterfall.
Yeah.
And there are a couple scenes in this movie that clearly place importance on human progress over nature, and that felt so much like one to me. But that's like I said, that's a Marvel thing because Marvel loves human progress.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, go on. That was it. It was just this weird random thought that came to me, when I have to watch the movie critically instead of just sitting back and enjoying it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely a thing about Marvel that I am of two ways about. On the one hand, because on the one hand, human technological progress is a great thing, and it is a thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just that a lot of our technological progress has been bad for every other species.
Yeah, that's kind of the other hand, which is that the world is on fire, and
yeah,
we're not doing anything about it. So we get to see the Jabari leader M'Baku challenge T'Challa, who is a standout role. Like this actor is phenomenal. This guy is like, he kind of steals the screen every time he's on it.
When I first saw this movie, I did not expect to like M'Baku.
Uh-huh.
I didn't think that was the point of having M'Baku.
Yeah.
But he's great.
He's fantastic. He's got a lot of character, and we don't get to see much of it here because in here he, like every other character, he kind of serves a metaphorical role. The Jabari tribe and him as their leader is kind of a representation of tradition, right? Like they don't agree with the other tribes, like from inception of Wakanda. They consider themselves to be a member of Wakanda, but they don't. But they are like other, even to the Wakandan tribes. T'Challa is challenged for the crown. We got a really cool fight scene.
Yeah, this fight scene, it is interesting how quickly it turns almost into like wrestling. Because they start with weapons. And the reason I find this interesting is because it's not true for the fight scene that later mirrors it. They start with weapons, and they eventually get down to basically both of them are rolling around in this water, half fighting and half drowning. It is great to look at. It's hard in a movie, I think, to sort of portray a fight scene well because you have to be worried about getting people hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie does a lot better than a lot of modern movies I've seen, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's camera angles. I don't know if they are willing to do things that could potentially get people hurt. But it reminded me of this is such a weird pull. Remember when we watched Batman 66?
Yeah.
And there were all these really fake-looking fight scenes, but I talked about how they look more real because the camera isn't just cutting away whenever there's a hit.
Yeah.
Like it does in modern movies. This one doesn't cut away whenever there's a hit. And so it sort of allows you to be in that space.
I do think that it's just good directing. Because before he did Black Panther, Ryan Coogler directed Creed, which is like a sequel and a successor to the Rocky franchise. And as a boxing movie, like boxing is a very visceral and a brutal sport. And it hurts. And he did a good job in Creed of training his actors and to be able to do the fight scenes in a way that he could keep the camera in the ring and on them because that's what he wanted to do, right? I think he took a lot of that experience to this movie, and even though this movie has a lot of supernatural fighting. Like in scenes like this where it's just two people duking it out, like like you said, it's visceral. They're like half fighting, half drowning. It hurts and it's awesome. And I think it's just good direction. I think it's just he is a guy who knows what he's doing. But also, unlike most Marvel movies, this fight scene like exists for a reason
and isn't just to be a fight scene.
Compare the beginning of this movie where we have there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of dialogue, but there's also like two fight scenes, right? We have the saving Nakia earlier in the film, and here with the ritual combat with M'Baku. Compare that to the beginning of like Captain America Winter Soldier, where we have one like super long fight scene of Captain America like infiltrating this boat and beating up a ton of dudes. And it's like the purpose of that is so that he can get the like USB stick that is going to start the plot of the movie. But that entire fight scene serves no narrative purpose. It served no metaphorical purpose for the character who is Captain America. Whereas like this fight, where the last fight showed T'Challa's like immaturity, this fight shows his regality. This is him in his element. He knows that this is his right and that he earned it and he's willing to take it. But he also, at the end of the fight, tells M'Baku to yield because he is a good leader and because his people need him.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I really like that because M'Baku is literally talked off the edge because he claims he would rather die. And T'Challa's like, no, your people need you. I don't want to throw you off a cliff today.
Yeah, it would be really rude to throw somebody off a cliff, in my opinion. Maybe you should not die.
I don't know what kind of person would do that.
The kind of person who would throw somebody off a cliff is probably not fit to be king. And I'm looking at you, Scar. looking at you.
Bold stance. So yeah, there are no more challenges. This is what got me. I didn't know what the rule is if multiple people wanted to challenge. Because I think the second person who fights T'Challa might just win. Because it's not like M'Baku didn't put up a fight. But there are no more challenges, so we're good.
I think at this point, we are introduced to Eric Stevens, played by the absolutely killer, no pun intended, actor Michael B. Jordan, who is phenomenal.
Yeah, so he looks like he's in the
he's in a museum, a British museum.
The one where famously they have all the stuff taken while they were off being imperial.
You mean every British museum? Oh,
no, but I think it's the big one. So the thing about Killmonger is that he looks like he could either have no money or be incredibly rich.
Yeah,
He's wearing these clothes that look shabby in a way that might be on purpose, or might be that he owns shabby clothes, which is a good, I think it's a good introduction to this character before we get to see what, like, really makes him him. It kind of makes him interesting.
He's a character that up until he, he says who he is. I think that scene is amazing. Up until that moment, you kind of don't know what it is that he's after. Like he keep like, and I think this look that he has during this heist is to kind of keep you on edge. Like what is this guy's deal? Is he what is he after? What is he thinking? It's like
right.
He's a character that every time he speaks, you can tell that there are like a million other thoughts happening. He's not really paying attention to you. So they heist this vibranium from this museum.
This is kind of a weird heist because it's a broad daylight heist, and part of the heist is killing a bunch of people. And it's good because it shows how these people are ruthless to get what they want. Unlike like if you watched a movie about a heist, you would want to be rooting for the characters heisting, and so they don't usually just kill random people for no reason. But these guys get to be more brutal with it.
Yeah, we get to see Ulysses Claw.
It's just his name. In such a supervillain way, his name is Ulysses Claw, and yes, he also has one hand.
Of course. Everybody knows that, like, the moment you lose an arm, you gotta make that choice. Am I gonna be a supervillain? Ooh, with a name like Ulysses Claw. Apparently he was in Age of Ultron.
He was. Ultron cut off his hand.
Oh, really?
Yes, I believe, now it's been a long time since I've seen Age of Ultron, I believe Ultron bought vibranium from him for his body. And then he cut off his hand for reasons I don't remember. But I remember that Ultron cut off his hand because I remember thinking, well, that guy's going to be important at some point.
That guy's coming back. And it's
you
funny.
Don't just cut off somebody's hand and have them die. That's not how it works.
It's funny because he doesn't really get to be anyone important.
No, he doesn't. That's kind of the amazing thing. Like, Killmonger is not a character that is ever referenced in another Marvel movie. He doesn't have the, like, Thanos thing where it's like, oh, who's this character? And then he shows up. Ulysses S. Claw gets that, and Claw only gets about half an hour of being a villain, and most of that time is off screen.
So he's played by Andy Serkis, everybody's favorite CGI monster, Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He played King Kong in the King Kong movie. He played Caesar in the Planet of the Apes reboot. He played Snoke in the 2 movies that Snoke was in, Star Wars, and He played Baloo in Mowgli, Legend of the Jungle, which he also directed.
Oh, well, I'm glad he dies.
Don't say that. As much as I hate that movie, I think...
I mean, his character died.
Baloo? Oh!
No, Claw.
Sorry, yes, Ulysses Claw. Like I said, it's another kind of amazing actor. And
Baloo might die. It's been a long time since I've seen that terrible movie.
God, I know. Just all wet and sticky. That whole movie just leaves you feeling gross. He really hams it up in this movie in a way that no other actor is doing, and it's kind of weird.
It is very weird. It makes me wonder, I'm trying to figure out if he's crazy. Like, he's been through a lot. A robot cut off his hand. He's been at, like, this private war with Wakanda. Like, is he just mad?
I do think that there is a small... I think his character, in a lot of ways, reminds me of, what's his name from Tarzan? Clayton. Thank you.
Yeah, well, he keeps calling the Wakandans savages.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he knows that they have better technology than anybody else can dream of. So, like, this is in no way not a race thing.
Right?
Or at least, like, a jingoist thing,
Well, I think it's definitely a racist thing. He's the character is South African, right? Like, from Johannesburg. It's clearly a racially coded thing.
If there is a place that has done worse than America with race relations, it might be South Africa.
Do you mean the British Empire? Because... That's where
the
it
British
came
Empire
from.
a little... Well, okay, it came from the British Empire, but so did we, and then we managed to do worse, I think, than the British Empire.
That's true. So, you're just holding on to the legacy, man. And I think this movie does talk a lot about empire, and we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, yeah, Ulysses Claw is like one of the heistmen.
One of the heistmen. They
make off with this vibranium hammer, and there is a character who is a barista who is part of this heist, whose purpose in the heist, I do not know.
I think she messes with the cameras so people don't see them.
Maybe, so she's the tech person.
Because she has, like, her phone out after it showed that they weren't being seen on the cameras. It is unfortunate. We were just talking about how there were a lot of good female characters in this movie. I'm not entirely certain she has a name.
Linda.
And she will die later because they want to show that Killmonger's really a bad guy.
I dislike that this is all this woman's character is.
Yes.
But yeah, she's just like, oh, he cares about her. Oh no, he's so evil.
Yeah. He fridges his own girlfriend.
He gave himself his own tragic backstory. He was like, my backstory, not tragic enough.
Really?
I know. We don't learn his name. I think they just call him Eric here. And T'Challa is notified of this theft because Ulysses Claw is the person who stole vibranium for Njobu back in 92. And so he discusses with the Council of Elders, right, like what should we do? Prior to this scene, though, and this movie, like I said, this movie moves at a clip. We do get a scene of T'Challa talking to kind of every character that he's close to. He talks to Okoye, he talks to Nakia, but he also talks to W'Kabi. And we get to see every character's kind of opinion of what Wakanda should do. Okoye is the status quo.
So much that, like, later, when the status quo changes, she's just like, this is the new status quo. She just wants Wakanda to be what Wakanda is.
Yeah. Nakia is kind of the role of, like, we should be out there doing more. We should be, helping out refugees. We should be...
So, Nakia is the first one who asks the, in my opinion, most profound question of this movie, which is it moral to live in a utopia when the world around you isn't? And I think it's an important question to ask, especially because right now the disparity of wealth has never been higher.
Yeah.
And it's constantly getting higher. And so there are people who live better than other people just because they live in a place that's better than other people.
Yeah.
And if you have the time to sit around and do nothing, then you have the time to question if it's okay for you to be sitting around and doing nothing. She asks this question. Killmonger asks the question. Everybody sort of gets a hand on that ball at some point.
Yes.
Which I quite like. I think it's an important sort of moral and philosophical question to think about.
Nakia represents a very specific kind of political belief, which is that we have the ability to do more, so we should do more. But and the great thing about, I think, T'Challa is that every person he never really agrees with anybody, and he always points out the flaws. What like how exactly would we help them? What exactly would we have to do? It's a nice thing to say we should be helping people, but at what point are we meddling? At what point are we interfering with nations that don't want us to interfere? Right? Because there's helping people, but people are not alone.
And there's that question. There's this question that seems ridiculous to me, which is like, will we make ourselves a target? And like, I don't see that this nation would have any problem defending itself. The bigger question is, would we make ourselves invaders?
Yeah.
Which is an important one, because if you go and you say, we're going to help you with this, you're having problems, then at what point do you say, well, obviously these people can't step all over you, we'll make sure they back off. Mm-hmm. And then you have a colony, basically.
Well, and that's kind of where W'Kabi comes in. W'Kabi is against refugee programs, right? He's like, Wakanda is for Wakandans. But if you want us to go out there and, save these people, invade those countries, and give them Wakanda. I think he uses the word, like, right, he doesn't say that, but that's kind of what he's saying, is like to give, Wakanda is for Wakandans, but if we take their country, they are Wakanda, and we can help them then.
W'Kabi is, in this scene, and in the scene where they're talking about Claw, I think he is raising a lot of red flags. And everybody involved should be like, hey, W'Kabi?
You planning something?
It's hard for me, because you're right, this movie does move at a fast pace. It's hard for me to parse. Wakanda has almost always been at peace. Mm-hmm. It's full of warriors.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like, how bloodthirsty is too bloodthirsty. Like, how much is just talking,
Yeah.
And I guess that's the lesson that T'Challa has to learn.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like, this is the big question for T'Challa at the end of the day is like, I am the king now, and I have to steer this ship, and I don't know, like, right, like which lighthouse is leading me to safety. So he does the thing that his father, who he meets after he gains the powers of Black Panther, he has a beautiful scene that we kind of skipped over, where his father tells him, you're a good person, and it's hard for good people to lead. So you should surround yourself with people you trust. We don't get enough of W'Kabi in this movie, but he trusts W'Kabi, and he trusts his input, and he asks him for his input. But at the end of the day, right, the question of like what is right is, I don't think this movie ever quite gets to the point where it's answered. But this movie cares less about what is the correct thing for a nation to do and cares more about what is the correct thing for a person to do. W'Kabi comes with him to this meeting of the elders because he's the general of the border guard. There's a little bit of tension between him and Okoye. There's got some romance there. And he tells him, hey, like when this guy blew up like a bunch of shit, like my parents died. And you should either kill that guy the moment you see him, or bring him back here for us to deal with him.
So I'm going to say this here. I could say it later, but I'm going to say it here. I don't see a way that what happens next is not an international incident, except that maybe it's just not common knowledge that T'Challa is the Black Panther. But even then, he walked into this place as T'Challa, or at least looking like T'Challa.
Yeah.
It could have been traced back. This whole thing where he, like, blows up a part of Korea... Action movie logic, not that big a deal.
Yeah,
but like
there are a couple of aside lines from Bilbo or whatever. Ross. God, what's that actor's name? Martin Freeman. He says he says twice, I think, like, you're lucky that I was there to make sure nobody heard about this.
Yeah.
In that weird accent that all British people do when they're trying to sound American.
Yeah, we get to... Martin Freeman's gonna be here soon to be the token white guy and show off his fake accent. In this watching of it, my second watching of this movie, Martin Freeman feels like a very weird person to be here. It doesn't feel like the movie knows what to do with him.
The movie clearly doesn't want him to be there.
It's because he spends a lot of later scenes, like, literally standing around... being an outsider in a way that's so superfluous and unnecessary. And he even has like he's got like a thing to do in the final climactic action scene. And again, it's so removed from what everybody else is doing, and it doesn't feel like it has the same importance. Right? Because for one thing, when T'Challa's king again, what does it matter if weapons went out to spies who work for Wakanda? He could just tell them to send them back. Martin Freeman, fundamentally, I think, should not be in this movie. And there are two reasons to have him in here. It is, one, so that people like me can say, oh, hey, it's like me, it's like a white guy.
Oh, look at him. There he is.
Look at him go.
Being all white in this movie.
Or two, you said before how this feels very apart from the Marvel Universe. He might just be supposed to be here so that we're reminded that it is part of the Marvel Universe. Or, like, you know, a mixture of both of those things. At any rate, he feels really weird in this movie. I like Martin Freeman a lot of the time. It's just, he's odd here.
He just doesn't really do anything. Or fit in.
That's part of the problem. Him being a fairly high-ranking member of the CIA does not come up when it feels like maybe it could. Also, there is this meta problem of this movie where, spoilers, T'Challa will eventually decide to bring Wakanda to stop hiding Wakanda and bring it into, like, the international conversation.
Yeah.
And have them do things like share their wealth. And the problem with that is a perfectly fine, reasonable decision for him to come to. But could it be that he a little bit came to it because the CIA definitely would know about Wakanda, and the only way to stop that would be to kill this guy that he is at least on friendly terms with? Like, him being there kind of breaks the moral journey that T'Challa goes on by meeting his cousin and understanding the horrible things that he went through, and then trying to make sure other people don't go through those same things. And it's like a fridge logic problem where the movie's fine, everything's fine, except you get up and walk away and you're like, hey, wait a second,
this fucking CIA guy.
Well,
so the problem to me is that he's CIA, which means, like, immediately on my radar, like, he's a piece of shit. And like,
I did have that problem where it's like, I don't know how you would deal with distrust of police in a superhero movie that's not like Spider-Man, like explicitly against police, basically. Except that in Marvel, they do go to the trouble of having like half of the US government Nazis. And so at least you could say, well, I don't think Martin Freeman's a literal Nazi.
We'll talk about him later, because this character, like I said, he sticks around like a bad rash. So they're in South Korea. Martin Freeman's there. Martin freeing it up, like, hey, I'm here, and Ulysses Claw gets there, and it turns out that he's selling the vibranium to Ross, and T'Challa tells him under no uncertain terms, like, we're taking him back. A firefight happens, a car chase happens. This car chase is like one of the coolest things in this movie.
This car chase is very cool. I really like Shuri driving the car in her lab all over the, I like how T'Challa has to, like, ride the cars. That's great.
That's awesome.
And also, Okoye just gets to be, like, a crazy badass in this scene.
She, like...
She destroys multiple cars with a spear?
There is a moment, before we even get to the car chase, when she is fighting on the balcony of this, like, I don't even know what to call it, like a gambling den, I guess?
Sure.
Where she's fighting with her spear, and she's super cool. She throws her wig at a dude, but she, like, throws this guy through a balcony and then, like, jumps down after him. Mm-hmm. And the camera, like, follows her down, and I was like, that camera move is the coolest thing I have ever seen in a Marvel movie. Like, how did they do that? And like the camera, like in one cut, goes from her to Nakia while she's kicking ass, and I'm just like, that's like the killer fight scene of this movie. That camera shot is awesome.
This was the scene where I thought, this fight scene does not look like a modern fight scene.
No.
This looks way better than most modern fight scenes are.
Absolutely. And in a movie where people are, like, Thor Ragnarok has, I think, a really good fight scene, but it's, a lot of the fights in Thor Ragnarok are, like, CGI people hitting each other.
Thor Ragnarok is straight up magic, which I don't have a problem with.
No, it's fine, and those fight scenes are cool.
But, like, the great thing about those fight scenes is that somebody worked really hard in, like, an animation department, basically.
Yeah, it's like I love watching. It's like here's what it is. It's the difference in Lord of the Rings when you're watching Legolas, like, mow down like 100 orcs that are all clearly CGI fake people. That's cool, but that is not as cool as Strider. What's his name again? Aragorn. Actually punching a dude who is in a mask with his actual fist, and then deflecting an actual dagger with his actual sword before punching that guy with his actual fist. Like, those are two very different kinds of cool, and Black Panther is very much like the latter. These are actual people actually hitting each other. Kind of cool.
Which is good, because that is what the character Black Panther always felt like to me.
Yeah.
He has superpowers.
Yeah.
But he has, like, low-level superpowers. He's, like, faster and stronger than a normal person, but, like, probably not even as fast as strong as, like, Spider-Man.
Yeah. I mean, he's Captain America in terms of, like, what he does and what he is.
Right. And so, like, his thing is that he needs to, like, get in there. Mm-hmm. And actually be fighting the whole time. He doesn't get to shoot somebody with lasers.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly.
I think that's why it has this movie has to have so many good fight scenes to be able to hold it together.
Absolutely. So they corner Claw. Black Panther just kind of rips his arm off, which is like, I don't know. It just seemed like
he did that, and I thought, well, that's got to be connected to nerves,
right? Like, you can't. You gotta, like, at least. Excuse me, I'm gonna tear your arm off. It's gonna be, like, Full Metal Alchemist tells me that should hurt. All right, so
right.
But he also does it while all of these people are, like, recording, and he's convinced, like, all right, we're gonna take him with us with the CIA. We're not gonna just kill this man. They take him to what I assume is like a little black site that the CIA just set up to interrogate him.
There is a weird interrogation scene where we get to see where Andy Serkis gets to show off the weird personality he has chosen for Claw.
Yeah.
And we very briefly think that there's going to be a problem when Martin Freeman finds out that Wakanda is way more developed than everybody thinks it is. But that ends up not to really be that problem, because he also ends up shot in the spine. And here is where I'm gonna put my foot down. this far, no further. Because at this point, T'Challa takes a bead of vibranium, which has, up until this point, been basically a phone, and shoves it into the bullet hole, and says this will stabilize him.
Yeah. And then he says, if you don't let us take him,
Wait!
we'll die.
You stop it! Because I need everybody to realize what just happened.
It's like, I got stabbed with a knife, and I'm like, ooh, let me just slip my iPhone in there. That'll
so
stabilize
weird.
me.
This is the moment that's like the most sci-fi bullshit in this movie. They keep doing this thing. If there is a problem with this movie, this is it. That vibranium can do anything.
Yeah.
And that the reason Wakanda is so great is because they have this stuff that's armor and medicine, and it makes holograms that you can touch sometimes, and nanobots, and all of this nonsensical stuff. I would have loved for vibranium to be one, maybe multiple specific things. Because, like, there's metals that can do a lot of things. But, like, they put it in their glass to make it bulletproof, and they put, I guess, like, pure uncut. No, it is cut. It's not pure, because pure vibranium is dangerous, which is at least something. But it's, like, regular phone vibranium. It's like if I took the lithium battery out of my phone and ate it because I was feeling depressed.
Well, that would briefly solve the problem. And then it would kill you. And it would kill you. It would then kill you, which is not solving the problem. Isn't lithium, like, used to be like a depression medication?
I believe it still is.
Yeah, so there you go. See?
But that's what I'm saying, is even if vibranium works as medicine, you can't just take the stuff that's used for your phone and put it in his back.
I do think that these beads are very much like a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think they're supposed to be, and I don't know if they ever say the word nanobots, but I think the beads are nanobots, and so maybe if you're going with, like, the sci-fi idea of nanobots, they can do anything. Like, maybe they start, like, stitching up muscles. And stopping veins from bleeding. But still, it's
like I said, I do think it would have been better if he'd, like, took another piece of technology out of somewhere and was like, yes, this is our like super cool medical thing. But the movie very much is like, doesn't bother with doing any of that. It's just like, nope, vibranium, it's the magic thing.
It's vibranium.
And I would say that I'm okay with it, if only because that's what vibranium kind of always has been in the comics and in these movies. I think it's okay for this movie just because this movie doesn't really care about the lore. It cares more about telling a story.
Sure.
But, like, yeah, if there was a scene in, like, I don't know, Captain America 2, the second one, where Captain America gets shot with a bullet and he just, like, bites a little bit of his shield off and shoves it in there, I'd be like, all right, that's just a plate. You can't do that. This movie at least gets the benefit of, like, okay, it's like a computer something, maybe. And, I will say this is the part where I put my foot down. You let that motherfucker die. Sorry. He knew the risks when he took this job.
Well, okay, Andy sides with Okoye.
He's a CIA agent. He is a piece. This is my problem. He should have been former SHIELD. He should have been, I don't know, like a diplomat. He should have been anything but the CIA. The problem is that, as we find out later in the movie, he is not just CIA. He is well informed enough with what the CIA does that he knows who Killmonger is and why he knows how to do it.
That's actually pretty fair.
He explicitly says, he's not Wakandan, he's one of our guys. But it's fine, whatever. They take him back to Wakanda. Clow is freed in this fight scene. It's not really a fight scene, it's like an explosion, and he's heisted out by his heist friends.
Right, and T'Challa sees Killmonger's ring.
That he's wearing around his neck.
Yeah, Frodo style, which is identical to T'Challa's own ring.
Mm-hmm. There should have been a scene where Ulysses just grabs that little ring and he's like, oh, look at that. It's precious. And I would have been like, hey, Gollum said that. So they go back to Wakanda and
Go on.
they go. Sorry, she said Frodo style, and I was like, "That's
Yeah,
funny."
no, I get it. It's just when you're like, Gollum said that. It's just...
There's a moment at the beginning of Lord of the Rings when they meet Aragorn, and I like nudged my girlfriend. And I said, "That's him. That's the Lord of the Rings."
God. Oh. Is it hard to be like that terrible? Is it difficult?
To be, honestly, it is. You got to search for new ways to be wrong. To be just a little bit wrong. Because if you know anything about Lord of the Rings, you know that there is no Lord of the Rings. It's whatever. It's not the point. They take him back to Wakanda to heal Ross. And at this point, T'Challa has to let W'Kabi know, hey, I fucked up. I broke my promise. My bro promise has been broken. Sorry.
And this is the moment where, like, W'Kabi's like, oh, I get it. It's not going to be the same. It's just going to be exactly the same. You and your father. Nobody ever did anything about this. And frankly, if you're not willing to bend a little bit, he did just go to Korea to try to get this guy. Mm-hmm. There's video footage of him almost killing him.
But he didn't.
I understand. It's just that, like, they are coded as, like, best friends.
Yeah.
Your best friend should get a little bit of benefit of the doubt when he fails to kill, like, your country's Osama bin Laden.
It's funny that you say that, actually, because apparently Andy Serkis made the exact same comparison.
When I was watching this, and it's because at the time that we're recording this, it is September 11th, 2020.
Yeah, so...
Maybe it is because I was watching on, like, September 10th. But at the time I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is, like, their 9/11.
Yeah.
This is, like, the thing that everybody remembers happened a while ago. But they didn't have the thing that we had, which is, like, overly zealous ideas about, like, what our army should do about it. You know? So, yeah, that's very much what it felt like to me.
And yeah, and that's kind of the thing, right? Is, like, if this is what this is, at what point is this character who is a military man, a warrior, right? Whose job is to prevent something like that happening ever again, whose parents died the last time it happened. It's not frustration at T'Challa, but frustration at the system that T'Challa now represents. And it's less that he's saying, I don't trust you as my friend, and it's more like, I don't believe that you can change this system anymore. Like, this was your chance to do it. At this point, T'Challa goes to Zuri and is like, yo, what the fuck? I just saw this guy who has a ring that looks exactly like my dad's ring that he got from Grandpa. And there's only one other person in the world who could have had a ring like that. And at this point, we learn what happened back in 1992. We learn that Njobu confesses to doing the crime, but also that the reason he had become so like radicalized to the point of supporting a terrorist attack on his own country was that he'd fallen in love with an American woman. He had a kid. He wanted to help these people. And he states explicitly to T'Chaka in this conversation, like, there are people all around the world who look like us, who don't have what we have, who don't have our chances. And I am just giving them the means of fighting back. If we could just give them the means to fight back, to protect themselves, this world would be different.
Yeah, and T'Chaka doesn't go in for it, which he knew he wouldn't.
Yeah. He points a gun at Zuri, who was the betrayer, right? He was the sheep in black's clothing.
Hey, could I raise an issue I have with this movie?
Yeah.
I try not to have an issue with the fact that they have African-sounding names. But I do have an issue with the fact they have somebody named Zori and somebody named Shuri. Because I'll be honest, when you said Zori, I was like, wait a second, is she in this scene? And then I realized what you were talking about. Do go on.
Yeah, no, it's no problem. I will say maybe that's on me. I'm not hitting that Z hard enough. Zuri as opposed to Shuri or Shuri.
I mean, I think it might have been a problem with when these characters were written in comics. Nobody thought they looked like when you looked at them, it doesn't look so bad.
No.
But when you say them out loud in the same movie together, they just sound extremely similar.
Maybe that's why those two characters are never really on screen at the same time.
Could be.
You never have a moment where Black Panther is like, ah, yes, here's my dad's best friend Zuri and also my sister Shuri here together. But yeah, so he was going to kill Zuri, and to protect him, T'Chaka kills him. And they decide to leave him and his son there.
Yeah, so this is buck wild because, frankly, I just don't understand it. Obviously, T'Challa brings us up with his father the next time he sees him. Spoilers again. But it shows, one, a certain amount of lack of forward thinking, leaving your nephew alone in a foreign land, and it's not clear if he has a mom, is a really weird choice when you could also just basically kidnap him and indoctrinate him into your country. But also shows an amount of like lack of genre savviness.
Yeah.
Because as a king, I feel like you should be worried about, like, angry sons of family members. Right? Because a lot of kings' problems come from angry sons of family members, just historically.
Yeah, it's the extreme position. Isolationism, keeping this country secret, is so important.
And the thing that I kept thinking of during this scene was what T'Chaka said to T'Challa: it's hard for a good man to be king. He explicitly was not a good man, at least not in this moment. He did an awful, terrible thing and had to live with it forever because he had to pretend it never happened.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The story was that his uncle disappeared.
Right, it wasn't even that he, like, died on a mission.
Yeah. He's just gone. The tragedy of that, and I think the unspoken tragedy of that, if you really think about it, is that when Eric finds his dad dead there, to the United States, to America, that is just another black man who died that no one's going to care about. Probably because this guy was clearly running guns and trying to radicalize the local black population. That story is going to become, in America in the 90s, is a story of good riddance. I think a lot of what this movie does is said unspoken because you can make that logical leap. That what they did to Njobu, leaving him there, it essentially erased him.
T'Challa does put a little bit of a bow on it when he says, "You didn't even bury him." T'Chaka never acknowledged that this was his brother.
And that's
real miserable.
Right? No, and I think that gets worse later, for sure. And that little kid ends up being, Eric Stevens, Killmonger, the villain of this movie. And we learn a little bit from Ross about his background. He is a Black Ops soldier who was specifically trained to topple foreign countries. And this is the part where Everett Ross should have died on that table, because that's what the CIA does.
Right. I mean, he talks about how this is their training.
Yeah. It's their playbook that they invented.
It's explicitly his thing. I mean, why did he want vibranium? Right? Why did the CIA want vibranium?
Yeah. What were they going to do with it? Make a time bullet.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds like something you could make with vibranium.
So while this is happening, Killmonger fridges his girlfriend.
Hard.
Kills Claw.
Yeah, who at least dies for a reason.
Before killing him, showing him that he's Wakandan, to just really rub that in his face. Takes his body to the border and presents it to W'Kabi, and is brought in front of T'Challa. This scene, and then from here, I think for a bit, these couple of scenes is like the real heart of this movie.
I did not realize the first time I watched this, it takes the movie a long time to get here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like a slog or anything, but it took its time.
Yeah.
For what, you're right, is absolutely the heart of the movie.
I wish we could have lived in this moment a little bit longer. This throne room scene, anyway. The conversation at hand is the elders are like, get this guy out of here, fuck this guy. And, T'Challa asks the question that I think everybody has, which is, what are you doing? What is this for? What's your plan? What's your end game? To which he says, I'm here to take that throne. This is mine. This is my birthright. He tells T'Challa, ask me who I am. And T'Challa isn't having any of it. He's like, I'm not playing this game with you. But one of the other elders, asks, and he tells them, I am N'Jadaka, I am Njobu's son. And he basically like reveals the secret, the lie, right? That T'Challa's father had like maintained for decades, right? Probably for most of his reign. Killmonger challenges T'Challa to ritual combat. T'Challa accepts, this is, I think, the real key choice that T'Challa makes in this movie, because he could have not accepted, right?
I don't know. Is accepting... He obviously does make the choice to accept, but I wondered if that was just showing that T'Challa cares about the ancient laws, the customs, in a way that Killmonger never will. Because, of course, as soon as Killmonger becomes king, he starts destroying them. But yes, he does explicitly make that choice. I don't know what would happen if he didn't.
I do not think, like the kind of the what if of like what would happen if he had said no, what would have played out, I think is less important than why he decided to accept the challenge, which is to explicitly say to Killmonger, your voice matters here. What happened to you was wrong. That's the big argument that he has with Zuri earlier. Why did any of this have to happen to this kid? They essentially like put this kid in a position of radicalization. But also, and a lot of people I think bring this up, which is that Killmonger has a point. What's wrong with Killmonger isn't his message, it's his method, it's his pain.
Well, the problem is that Killmonger has a point, but has been very much shaped even by the point that he's making, to where what he wants to do is be as bad as or worse than the people who have made him what he is. Mm-hmm. When, if he were going to be more of a hero or anti-hero character, he would just want to dismantle that.
Yeah.
Instead of replacing it with the same thing, but him in charge.
Yeah. His treatment of, like, his using the custom, like you mentioned earlier, he uses this custom to force T'Challa's hand, but then as soon as he's in power, destroys it. Like, that's what he is, And
again, as mentioned by Ross, it is what he has been trained to do.
So they have the ritual combat.
This combat is interesting. I mean, it's a good fight, but I was trying to see, like, the psychology of it. And I really don't think T'Challa wanted to kill Killmonger.
No.
In a way that I think that is... I mean, I think Killmonger could hold his own, obviously. Yeah. But I think that is the reason that he lost against Killmonger and not to M'Baku. M'Baku might not have even wanted to kill T'Challa either.
Yeah.
He just wanted the throne. But Killmonger did not have that like piece of mercy that would have made him hold back at important moments.
No, for sure. And I mean, like, you see the difference between this combat and the last ritual combat is how visceral it is. But, like, the thing about this fight is that at this point, T'Challa knows he's wrong and doesn't know how to make it right. Whereas Killmonger has the strength of his conviction. He is on this path. He's not stopping. T'Challa tries to talk him out of it.
Yeah, but he doesn't do very well. All he says is, like, we'll find another way. And that's gonna sound pretty hollow.
Yeah. Man, he gets his ass kicked.
Very much so. To the point where the ritual combat is interrupted by Zuri, who Killmonger then recognizes as his Uncle James just before he kills him.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know why that was the moment, but I got really sad.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, that's sad.
That's a real Obi-Wan Kenobi moment.
Well, I just a little bit got sad for Killmonger, too.
Yeah.
Because this, when he recognized him as, quote, Uncle James, that made me think, well, this was a person he trusted, and he never saw him again after his dad dies, and maybe he thought he'd run off, maybe he thought he'd killed him for a while, but now here he is.
Yeah, no, for sure, right? Like, Eric, he is the tragic figure of this story. You can easily see if T'Chaka had just made a different choice, this guy being as good, if not better, than T'Challa. Because unlike T'Challa, Eric never second guesses himself. He truly believes in what he's doing. And if that message had just been put into a vessel that was healed as opposed to one that was broken, he could have done amazing things. But now all he is angry and resentful. As he even says, I'll kill both of you, and he does. Well, he gets a 50%, which is an F, but I I think you can raise it up to a B for effort because he straight up throws T'Challa off this cliff. At this point, Nakia, who is incredibly politically adept, is like, we gotta get mom and sis out of here.
That makes a lot of sense. You don't have to be that genre savvy to be like, the new king's probably gonna kill anybody who had anything to do with the old king, huh?
Probably should get them out of here. They are smuggled away, and Killmonger, becomes king. And he is given the rights to become Black Panther, He gets the heart-shaped herb juices poured into his mouth, and he goes through what T'Challa went through earlier with his ceremony. He's buried in the sand, and he gets to go to... The wording is specifically he gets to go to the world of his ancestors. And this is, to me, like the real tragedy of what T'Chaka did, because when T'Challa goes to the world of his ancestors, he's in the savannas, right? He gets to see like in the distance hundreds of Black Panthers, right?
Right. They're all like crouched in trees. This makes it feel like a family tree type thing.
Yeah.
Like it was all of them down to him.
But all Killmonger gets is a room and his dad.
As the room that his dad died in.
Yeah.
His childhood home.
And the symbolism here, and there are tons of people who have written about this scene, because this scene is the key. This scene is what makes Killmonger's character such a fucking, like, so speakable, is that in the distance, out of the window, you can see the same sky that T'Challa sees, but it is so removed, it is so far away, it is disconnected. And the conversation that he has with his dad here is like, he mentions, like they're going to say you're lost. And the reason he says that is because that's what he is. He is disconnected from his own ancestral home, spiritually as well as in this moment. I think that speaks to and like definitely not everybody, and I'm like the last person who should be saying this, but that speaks to a lot of people's experiences here in the United States, but more specifically to Black people because of the history. They literally had that taken away from them. This is the hypocrisy, all right, of the choice that T'Challa's dad has made, is that by leaving him here, by separating him from his ancestral home, he has done something equivalent to what happened to a lot of Black people in America. He has removed his culture from him. That is a murder that cannot be apologized for. And Killmonger's response to it is, maybe they're the ones who are lost, and I'm gonna go find them. Best scene in the movie. Holy shit. Holy shit.
And then he wakes up and burns all the and burns all the magic fruit that does that. Which I guess has nothing to do with vibranium, which is an interesting thing. That there is a side thing that also gives people powers.
Yeah. That
they have. Which I hadn't considered until now after I did the rant about how vibranium does everything.
Well, Tony, let me tell you about why these flowers are magical.
Alright. Alright.
I'm just kidding.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
I do think it's because of vibranium, but I wouldn't be able to tell you what reason they have for that. Mm-hmm. I will say, just as an aside, that the actor who plays Njobu, who plays Killmonger's dad, Sterling Brown, got a lot of recognition for this scene in particular, because he's only in this movie for like 5 minutes. But like this scene, this like 2-minute scene, like I think hit a lot of people really hard and emotionally because of this guy's acting as his dad, and like the realization that his dad has when he tells him like, what have I done? What have I created with this kid? So yeah, he wakes up, he burns the heart-shaped flower, but before he gets to do that...
By the way.
Quick
Google on the Marvel Wikia says that the heart-shaped herb was mutated by the giant meteorite of vibranium.
Nice. There we go.
Just so we're all clear.
So yeah, vibranium mutation. That's how we do. But before he gets to burn all of them, Nakia sneaks in and steals one. Her plan is for them to appeal to M'Baku to overthrow Killmonger. And she tries to get Okoye in on this, and this is the scene that you mentioned earlier, right, where Okoye's like says no to that.
Right. Her loyalty is to the throne.
Let's see. Nakia, Shuri, Black Panther's mom, and Ross.
I call her the Queen Mother because that's how she is most often referred to.
Queen Mother is a really cool name.
And I don't know if they say her actual name. I'm sure somebody does at some point, but like it got right by me. So in my head, I call her the Queen Mother.
Yeah, it's Ramonda, but it says here that she's his stepmother.
Oh, that's kind of interesting.
That is interesting. They go and they appeal to M'Baku, basically saying like, "Come on, you gotta do this. This guy's insane." M'Baku's like, "This is where this guy really shines. This character. Oh my god." Ross tries to do anything and is like, "Hey, this isn't. Go be a character in like a different movie."
Yeah, he like hoots him down. I don't know if that's the word to describe the like gorilla type sound that he makes. The whoo.
Yeah.
But he just will not stop until Ross stops talking.
Yeah.
I feel like they try to use the fact that Ross does not belong in this movie as comedic fodder, but it like just feels like he doesn't belong. That being said, M'Baku's great.
He's fantastic. He has a little bit of fun here before he takes them to a medicinal tent thing.
Mm-hmm. Giant ice pack. So the gorilla tribe does not appear to have the same like technological advancements that the rest of Wakanda has. And I assume it's because they have explicitly made themselves removed from Wakanda.
I do think that they definitely do have some technological advancements. Like, they're self-sustaining.
It might be that they choose to live in a way that they don't use the technological advancements all the time.
Yeah,
too.
For sure. I wish we had more of this. What these guys' lifestyle is. It seems very interesting for sure. Because yeah, you're right. I don't know what their whole deal is, right? Whether they are just like anti-technology or whether it's something else.
So T'Challa's laying in this tent. He is in a coma, but they've packed him in snow so that he's not gonna die straight away, which is the one scientifically sound thing that happens in this movie.
Yeah, for sure. It lowers the heart rate, puts the body into like overdrive mode. He tells them like, listen, if you could move him, but as soon as you do, he's gonna die. And they decide to give him the powers of Black Panther and hope that would heal him.
Yeah, and we get to see the ancestral plane for the last time. And I feel like we've talked about this scene a bit already.
Yeah.
But what I like, just the one thing I like about it is that it's in sunrise.
Yes.
Which I quite like as another good visual metaphor. Also, all of the past kings, I assume they're all past kings, are standing around as humans instead of just being more vague. Mm-hmm. I assume because T'Challa, instead of feeling like they have passed something down to him, feels like he needs to confront them.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also, like, I do think another part of it is that spiritual reverence, right, has been broken. These are now people who have made mistakes. And specifically one big mistake that he feels needs to be addressed now at that moment by him, which is that turning their backs on the world is not the solution, because they are a part of the world and they have a responsibility to it as well, not just to their home country. So he wakes up, he's healed. They decide that they are going to overthrow Killmonger and stop him from orchestrating all of the war dogs around the world into revolting with W'Kabi. M'Baku is like, all right, y'all can leave now. Get the hell out of here. I helped.
I really like M'Baku in this scene too, where everybody's like pledging their loyalty to T'Challa, and M'Baku's like, "Are you done?" Because they're in his throne room,
right? I know. Nobody bows down to me in my throne room.
And T'Challa tries to enlist his help, and he says, "Nah, that probably won't come back either."
So
it's amazing all the things that don't come back in this movie.
Honestly, you could count them on one hand. It's so many. They confront Killmonger, tells him, hey, challenge isn't over yet, buddy. Let's keep duking it out. This is, I think, the big fight scene of the movie, right? This is the airport fight scene in Civil War. This is like the big end fight scene. This is the rest of the movie is this fight scene.
This movie, what is it, like a 15-minute fight scene?
God, it has to be, yeah. Like,
it's a long fight scene. In fact, my notes, as much as I had them, pretty much died off here, just because there was so much fight scene, and it didn't feel belabored.
No,
every fight that was happening felt earned.
But also, so I have this problem in a lot of superhero movies, but it's I think the biggest in the Man of Steel movie, which is like 90% fight scene. Every time a fight scene happened in that movie, the movie stopped. No plot happened during those fight scenes. It was like Superman arrives, plot happens for like 2 minutes, and then like a 30-minute fight scene happens, and then after the fight scene's over, we can have more plot. But for this entire movie, including this incredibly long fight scene, the plot is moving forward. It's just the fight scene is serving a purpose to the plot where we get to see all of these characters who have been introduced get to have their limelight, but also get to choose explicitly which side of this ordeal that they're on. Okoye and her regiment are in support of T'Challa, and they turn on Killmonger, but W'Kabi chooses, like, no, we're going to stick by this guy. This guy can do the thing.
And W'Kabi, I did not appreciate it at the start of the fight. He has a much bigger fighting force.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
Yeah.
Oh, and also he gets rhinos.
Yeah, which is an even bigger fighting force, right? Like,
which seems like a crazy thing to turn on your own people, but I guess when you're at the beginning of a civil war, you go big or go home.
And what I will say is like, it's a good fight scene. It's just as hard to talk about a fight scene. It's like, oh, and then he punched this person.
Yeah,
and then
it's just some good fight scene stuff happens. What do you want?
Yeah, like, go watch it, It's there's nothing I could describe that would be cooler.
There's a little bit, it feels a little bit in this, I think I said this before sometime in this podcast, it feels a little bit Lion King.
Yeah.
You have the false king being fought by the people who were closest to him, who were all women, but he had already developed this, like, oh, these are who's on my side, and so there's this, like, secondary fight happening. And then, of course, T'Challa gets Killmonger off alone, and they fight in a pit.
Hell yeah.
We don't need to describe the fight scene, but they end their particular fight in the vibranium mines.
Yes.
Where there are these sound dampeners that stop vibranium from basically doing all the cool stuff it does. And so it has this sort of flow that reminds me a little bit of Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah. The Duel of the Fates.
Yeah. Where they're fighting, and then this stuff turns on, and they have to stop because there's a train in between them.
Yeah.
And their armor stops working. But that was something T'Challa wanted, because he wanted Killmonger's armor to stop working long enough for him to stab him. Because it's good armor they're wearing, and they could just fight like that forever.
They could. I will say, bringing up the Duel of the Fates Star Wars scene, is that in Star Wars, every time that those shields turned on and they couldn't fight was kind of annoying.
It was. There was, I believe, the Jedi started sitting around. Like, I think it was supposed to be they were, like, meditating and getting ready, but, like, they sat down.
But in this, every time the train goes by, like, we get like, conversation, they talk to each other and they argue.
It is more interesting than the Duel of Fates in Star Wars. It just makes me think of that.
It makes me, yeah, no, for sure. I just want to bring it up because I do think that, I was like, why was that not cool, but this is cool? It's like, oh, because they're talking to each other. But also because they're like, the moral, in an action movie, every fight scene can't just be a cool fight scene. It should be a cool fight scene, obviously. But the characters who are fighting are not fighting to look cool. They are fighting because they both have a moral stance that neither of them is willing to back down on. The fight is a metaphor for the argument, for the conversation. And so every time Killmonger brings up a good point, he also gets an upper hand in the fight. And every time T'Challa counters it and brings up his own good point, we see kind of the reverse.
So something that you will see in books more than movies, but that I think more movies are being smart enough to do, is the fight as a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's so important in storytelling that, like, nothing is wasted. If you have a fight scene, it has to mean something. And they do that very well in this movie.
Yes.
You're right.
The cool mechanic works. Black Panther is able to just get the spear, like, into this guy's chest right as the suit closes around over it, which is, like, cool.
And this is a way to die that apparently fucking hurts, but also takes a long time because he's not bleeding out. The spear's still in there.
Yeah.
So T'Challa like walks Killmonger back up to watch the sunset and offers to like get him medical help. The same thing he did to M'Baku. And Killmonger has a great closing line about how the men who jumped off the ship knew that death was better than life in chains.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really resonant line. But also, I bet Wakandan prisons actually work. Like, the way Wakanda is shown to me, I bet they have decent prisons.
For sure, but I do think it does serve as a big question, right? Because Killmonger isn't like a guy who stole some fruit. He's not a guy who committed murder. He's more than that. He represents a political ideology that he refuses to leave. And the question isn't just, if I let you heal me, you'll keep me locked up. It's, do you even know what you would do with me? Or would you just do what your dad did and just hide it? But he takes that choice into his own. He's like, no, I would rather die here. I think to me it's represented. It's a good moral for T'Challa, right? Which is that this kind of a mindset, this way that the world raises people leaves no room for conversation. You can't yield to this. And that's basically where the movie ends, but we do get a little bit more wrap up, I think, after this. We see T'Challa take back the throne room, and we see him and Shuri back in Oakland, where he mentions to her, like, hey, this is where everything started, was in this building, and I bought it. He gets to have an Iron Man moment here that I think is cool. He's like, I bought this building and that building and that one over there, and here's my cool spaceship.
He does get to show off his cool spaceship. A bunch of kids are like, whoa, let's tear it up and sell it on eBay.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, what I love, right? I love what one kid says, where he's like, we're all going to get like $1 million each.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, first of all, raise them standards. You could probably sell this for way more, but also good on you for sharing. We all found this. What did he say? Space Bugatti?
Anyway, it's a good movie.
Yes. Killer. Like, this movie was a moment, I think, in history. Like, this movie's existence. For sure. And I think it was understood even when this movie came out. This movie was nominated for like 7 Academy Awards, and it won 3 of them. It was nominated for 226 total accolades, and it won 90 of them. Like, I think there was definitely a happy thing that this movie exists, and I like it a lot. I think it's up there. I think it's like my favorite of the MCU movies. Watching it again made me realize like how much I appreciate it. It definitely bumped it up a couple of ranks from the last time I thought about ranking all of those movies. But like the reason I wanted to watch it is because like not a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman, who plays T'Challa, passed away, which sucks. There's been a lot of conversation, I think, about people asking, well, what happens now? What happens with the Black Panther movies now? And I don't think that's a conversation that anyone can have and anyone should have, because that doesn't matter. The bigger question for me, is like, this movie was the first time in a long time that a lot of kids could look at a superhero who looks like them. And this movie came out, 2 years ago.
Wait, is that right?
Yeah.
Jesus.
And yeah, I know, right?
This year has been so long.
These past 2 years have been like 10 years long. But there are a lot of kids out there who watch this movie and are gonna have to have this conversation now, which is tough. And I think it says to me, like, we need more movies like this, more movies by Black directors and Black writers, starring Black actors for Black kids, so that every time this happens, you don't have to think about, like, this was the only one. It is like more than a tragedy that Chadwick Boseman passed away so young and so early in his career.
Very few people can say not only that their work outlives them, because that's actually something almost anybody could say,
yeah,
but that their work is like a cultural touchstone,
mm-hmm.
and could even go so far as to change something.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is amazing. For as much comfort as that gives you. It's just been a rough year.
Yeah.
I feel like I keep saying it, but here's the thing, Andy, is it keeps being true.
I wash my hands of this year for sure.
Well, you should wash your hands this year.
Oh, yeah, also, yes. When do you think we're going to get a movie where, like, everybody in it's just wearing face masks? Like, that's just what they're doing? There's going to be, like, a costume designer who's doing an interview at the Oscars, like, I designed this face mask to represent the character. and I'm going to be like, fuck, man, 2020 was a fucking year.
Anywho, thank you for listening to Direct-to-Video VHS. I've been your host, Tony Urbis.
I have been your host, Andy Reyes. Did we introduce ourselves at the beginning of this?
Man, who cares?
Oh, man.
They know who we are, probably.
Yeah, hopefully. They know where we live.
You can find me on Twitter at TheaterBats, and you can find my comic at inspiredbytrueevents.org.
You can find me on Twitter at royalty_Valens. That's it. That's all I do, is that and this.
Yeah, and you can find the podcast at directto.video.
Heck yeah. Please give us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you catch your podcasts. We really appreciate them.
And just like keep on keeping on, everybody.
Yeah.
And
big thank you to Lee Rosevere for the song
Planet E off the album
Trappist 1.
God, what are we gonna watch next time?
Well, we could watch the movie that we said we were gonna watch, which sounds exhausting just even thinking about that.
I don't want to watch. This might be too much of a request. I don't want to have to think about imperialism for like a little while.
That's fair.
And like we watched Tarzan, which was explicitly like weirdly on the wrong side of the imperialist argument.
Yeah.
And Black Panther, which was on the other side. And I would just like to watch something that has nothing to do with imperialism.
That's fair. So you want to watch Pirates of the Caribbean? Is that what you're... am I on the wrong...
Pirates of the Caribbean 1 doesn't have much to do with imperialism, besides the fact that they are all imperialists. Let me see what my list says. I have a list somewhere.
I know. Oh, God.
Nah.
That's exciting. Hit me with it. What are we watching?
No, not that one.
No. No, he says.
I don't remember when we decided these ones. Do you want to watch Van Helsing?
Fuck me, dude. Why? When did we make this choice?
This one has it listed Van Helsing and Hansel and Gretel.
Fuck. I've seen both of these movies.
Have you?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, dude. I will say...
We're coming up on October.
Yeah, we got it. It's that spooky time. Fuck. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to warn you right now. I remember really liking Van Helsing.
I think Van Helsing might be good, but I think it might be camp good, which is about what I want.
I remember fucking hating Hansel and Gretel though. and I like that was a fucking Jeremy Renner movie. Dude, like before people thought he was a good actor and were wrong about it. Okay. Oh man, I'm not excited about this. Okay. Let's do it. Oh, never mind. This was Hansel and Gretel was post-Avengers.
It was. I think it was kind of sold on the Hawkeye angle.
That's insane. This movie that came out in 2013 feels like it should have come out in 2003, which is when I thought it came out.
No, this can't be the one. The one I clicked can't be the one.
Which one did you click on?
Why does this exist? This one... I went to IMDb and typed in Hansel and Gretel.
Oh, did you get the horror movie? That came out like 2 years ago?
I mean, this is not a horror movie. It's called Hansel and Gretel Get Baked.
Oh, no, that's not it. What? Did somebody make a weed movie about... No. What?
Yeah, aka Hansel and Gretel and the 420 Witch.
Wow.
Okay, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, that's it.
That's the one. What is this?
Look at her freaking top. Oh, this is gonna be a bad movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, jeez. Okay, a classic tale with a new twist.
Oh, boy.
Woof. All right. Yes, let's do it. I'm excited. I haven't seen Van Helsing in, like, probably a decade.
Yeah, me neither. How do we end? I am the ghost of John Smith.
Are we done? Is that it?
I think so! It's been like 2.5 hours. We should be done.
2.5 hours, and before that, like 2.5 months.